What a ride it's been. Apparently, America and Iran have a deal. Here's a 1-minute summary from CBS Pittsburgh, the tightest and best I could find to provide a quick overview of this very seminal moment.
Well, the U.S. and Iran have reached an agreement aimed at ending the war and reopening the Strait of Hormuz. A senior U.S. official says President Trump and Iran's parliament speaker have both signed the agreement virtually, with a formal signing ceremony expected to take place Friday in Geneva. The text of the agreement has not been released, but the president says ships are already moving through the strait.
Ships are starting to go out now. On Friday, it'll be completely opened.
The agreement is fundamentally built around a two-step verification process. We say to the Iranians, you are welcome to have access to an unsanctioned economy, but only if you honor the commitments that you make in this agreement.
Oil prices plunged to 3-month lows after the agreement was announced, but analysts cautioned it would take time for Americans to see relief at the gas pump.
It's been a very dramatic few weeks, with a major breakdown of relations between President Trump and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. It's been widely reported. Trump reportedly used some F-bombs when speaking directly with Bibi and when speaking about him. President Trump wants and needs this tiresome war with Iran to end, and he needs it to end with a deal that he perceives to glorify his brilliant leadership. Problem is, so does Netanyahu. Netanyahu, unfortunately for him, has no leverage with Trump, who is just fed up, it seems, with his friend Bibi. So, what do we know? Well, we think we know that a Memorandum of Understanding that we believe sets out broad parameters for discussion of a deal between Iran and America was signed electronically on Monday, June 15th, by President Trump and Vice President Vance, as well as Iranian Foreign Minister Aragchi. It's kind of like docu-sign meets diplomacy. What else do we think we know? Well, President Trump tells us that the agreement opens up the Strait of Hormuz to oil tanker traffic and other commercial vessels. And that immediately, incredibly, led to a precipitous drop in oil prices at gas pumps across America. That pleased President Trump, as did the surge in stock market prices. The parties to the agreement, Iran and America, intend to meet in Geneva on Friday for a formal signing ceremony. From then, we are told that the memorandum commits the two countries to sort out any and all remaining issues, like Iran's nuclear ambitions and capabilities, for once and for all. I suppose we'll find out more on Friday, should things go smoothly, of course, between now and then. Sunday and Monday were very tense days in Israel. Prime Minister Netanyahu was sequestered with his top advisors and security cabinet from Sunday night, and he did not emerge to make a statement to the nation until Monday evening. It was reminiscent of October 7th, when it took the Prime Minister approximately 5 hours to appear for a few seconds on television on October 7th after the Hamas attack. 5 hours. It was an eternity. And it was an eternity from Sunday night until Monday night as well. On Monday night, Netanyahu spoke only in Hebrew when meeting with the press, ensuring that the English language international media would not bother to run his statement. You can watch it now here with English subtitles.
ההסכם הזה הוא נעשה על ידי ארצות הברית, על ידי נשיא ארצות הברית, והוא חושב שהוא יכול באמת לשלב גם את פתיחת המצרים וגם את ביטול תוכנית הגרעין, ואמרתי, זו ההחלטה שלו. אני חוזר ואומר, זו ההחלטה שלו, הוא מוביל את זה. ואני כמובן הבעתי את דעתי בשיחות שונות. מנגד, אמרתי שיש לנו אינטרסים שלנו, קודם כל לגבי איום הגרעין, אני מחויב שלא יהיה לנו, שלא יהיה איום כזה מולנו. ושנית לגבי לבנון, אנחנו יצרנו שטח חיץ שם, שטח ביטחוני, אנחנו נשאר בו ככל הנדרש. איראן רצתה שאנחנו ניסוג משם, זה לא קרה. אתה יודע למה זה לא קרה? בין השאר? משום שעמדתי מאוד מאוד איתן. הייתי מאוד מאוד נחרץ בדבר הזה, ואני חושב שידידינו האמריקנים מכבדים את הנחרצות ואת העמידה האיתנה הזאת. אנחנו נשארים שם, כי אנחנו צריכים להגן על תושבי הצפון.
Okay, now that you have the backdrop, let's get to the discussion with two great friends of State of Tel Aviv and beyond. Each one a singular talent when it comes to understanding and analyzing the Middle East today. Andrew Fox, known not just for his candor, sharp mind, and prodigious output, but for his independent thinking, a rarity these days, and especially when it comes to the Middle East. Andrew calls it as he sees it. It was his publication Monday morning of a quite brilliant essay on the rather messy outcome of this war that prompted me to arrange an interview in a hurry. You can find the link to his written piece in the show notes. I urge you to read it. Joining me and Andrew is another great friend of the podcast, Negar Mojtahedi, Canadian journalist of Iranian descent who, like Andrew, also seems to run on no sleep. Her work on Iran is distinguished, in my view, from her peers. Her work is consistently superb and reflects a very deep understanding of the political and social complexities of life in Iran. My first call with any Iran-related question is always to Negar. It was an unexpected pleasure to manage to wrangle Andrew and Negar quite spontaneously on Monday to discuss this moment, or maybe I should say yet another seminal moment in the Middle East. And keep in mind, we're separated by 10 hours too, so yeah, we did it. I'm Vivian Berkovich, former Canadian ambassador to Israel. Let's do this. Monday, June 15th, 2026. I was just saying it's a day of infamy, but it is certainly a day that none of us will forget. The great Andrew Fox, Negar Mojtahedi, thank you both so much for making time on short notice to speak to State of Tel Aviv and beyond today.
Pleasure.
Thanks for having us. Pleasure.
Just such an A-list team, and let's get to it. Andrew Fox, you're really kind of the catalyst for this hot take on the day that whatever happened between America and Iran. You published earlier today on Substack a quite brilliant, maybe even more brilliant than your usual stuff, 5,000-word essay that, yes, I have read twice. It will be in the podcast notes, so for anyone who hasn't had the pleasure of reading it, pleasure may be the wrong word, you should go through it. It's absolutely superb. And what you do is what you've been doing since really day one of this war, since February 28th. And you summarize very succinctly and powerfully why this U.S., Israel, other powers sometimes, war, military action, targeting Iran is just an unqualified debauch. So I think that's a pretty fair summary of your 5,000 words.
Yeah, well, I mean, the clue's in the title, the anatomy of the debacle. So,
Yes,
I
but
was not pulling any punches.
it's not pulling any punches, and you pull no punches in the text. Andrew, why is it such a disaster as it looks now? What were the grave, mistaken premises upon which this war began?
Well, I should start by saying that I wanted nothing more than this war to be a success. I think we all wanted to see the end of the Iranian regime. We all wanted to see the people of Iran freed. We all wanted Israel to be safer. We all wanted more stability in the Middle East. And, I had high hopes going into it. The Americans, I've worked with the American military extensively, and they're good at planning. And I had faith that they would have a good plan for this, but unfortunately they didn't. And we've seen a lot of leaks about how this plan came into being. Now, and I think it's really important that we disambiguate between what we think actually happens and the sort of the mad, basically anti-Semitic rhetoric that's come from it. The whole Jews control America and led Trump by the nose. That piece I reject completely. I think what we can say is that Bibi had a plan that he sold. Absolutely. That is fair. It's a plan that might have worked had it all gone according to plan at every single step of the way. And that plan was essentially quite detailed. It was to take out the regime leadership. It was to then start degrading the IRGC and the Basij. It was then to have a ground maneuver from the Kurds and possibly other groups supported by sort of allied air power. But then Trump turned off that phase. And that's where really everything completely fell apart. I think if you could point to one decisive moment, it was that, because it opened the door to all the other mistakes that happened.
When you say that, there were these initial stages, hit hard, hit military sites, hit the security forces. But then in order to accomplish the ultimate goal, which was regime change, you needed some form of ground incursion. And the plan, we think, that was suggested by Prime Minister Netanyahu and others on the Israeli side was to kind of fire up the Kurds.
I think you can picture it. You've got the regime leadership gone.
Yeah.
You've got the IRGC, Basij getting smashed all over the place. You've then got a major ground incursion from the northwest, seizing, taking ground with air support. You'll have Iranian forces on the ground committed. That weakens the whole thing, and that then hopefully creates the space for the people to kind of rise up and start knocking over regime infrastructure. That is, it's a stretch. I'm not going to say it's the best plan ever, but I think it's better than what we ended up with, which was just a load of bombing where the Americans burned through about 50% of their critical ammunition stocks. And then Iran was free to seize and take control of the Strait of Hormuz and then choke off global oil supply, which is why we're where we are today. If you look at what one of Exxon's executives said, that the world economy had about 2 weeks, and that was about a week ago, which is why I think Trump has been sprinting for this deal, because you get $150, $160 a barrel. Americans are paying $8 a gallon at the pump, and they've got midterms coming up. So that's really the genesis of this deal, I think. And the backup plan they came to, which was to try and choke off the regime by having a blockade of the blockade, that might have worked in a very sort of much longer time frame.
Right.
But unfortunately, Trump didn't have that time that needed for that plan to fully mature, because of what was going to happen with the world economy when global oil reserves ran out. So what we've got is a plan that might have worked. I'm not saying it would have worked. I'm saying it might have worked. We know Erdogan made phone calls, got that part of the plan with the Kurds switched off.
Right.
And from that point onwards, they were effectively making up strategy as they went along, which is always a recipe for disaster. And I'll go back to Sun Tzu, The Art of War, where he says, tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. And that's really what we're seeing today.
There were 2 points that you make in your piece, which were, one, when Erdogan phoned Trump and said, you can't let the Kurds do this, right? And he had his own reasons. He's not going, the Kurds are his forsworn nemesis. He is not going to allow them to have this moment of glory and to storm into Iran. And Erdogan made some comment to that effect to Trump, and Trump, from what we understand or think we know, is that he said, okay, I'll call it off. And then the other thing that you pointed to in your piece that was just, it killed the whole operation, the possibility of any, positive outcome, was the Hormuz factor. The fact that it clearly had just not been considered in a very serious way proactively. That the American expectation was that it would go in with such lightning speed, it would take a few days, it would be like another Venezuela, that Iran wouldn't even have time to think of blockading Hormuz, and we all know what happened. So those two things, the Erdogan factor and Hormuz, would you isolate those as being among the more decisive points?
Yeah, those are the two. And, the original plan was maximalist. Bibi's plan that he sold to Trump was maximalist. And there's always a danger in that, because the bigger you go, the more second and third order effects you can have in your strategic planning. So if you send the Kurds into northwest Iran, what does that do for Syria, Iraq, and Turkey? Where are the ripples that go along here? If you then get, the Balochistan area to rise up as well, what does that do for Pakistan, which is, of course, a nuclear power, which is a whole game changer? And we know the Pakistanis moved it was either a brigade or a division, I forget which, to the border at the start of the war to reinforce it, because they were worried about this part of the plan. So, there's all kinds of ripple effects the bigger you go. And with aims that maximalist, you have to be prepared to fully commit. And that's what they never really did. There was never any real talk of, okay, so we've lost our Kurdish ground troops. What are we going to do instead? Okay, just change the plan. There was no kind of contingency planning for it seems. And I think that really does speak to a toxicity at the top in Washington. because there is no way on this earth the Pentagon planning teams didn't flag Hormuz. No way in a million years. Like if you do any war game in the last 30, 40 years around Iran, you consider Hormuz as the killer factor. So they knew about it, and they would have had contingency plans, but for some reason the political echelon disregarded them. And that speaks to, I think, a really toxic yes man culture at the top in Washington, which is, I guess, what happens when you have a personality cult in charge.
And not just, I was just going to say, not just a personality cult. You have a president who, in many ways, is acting in the same style and fashion as these Middle Eastern leaders do, in the sense that he's relying on certain individuals who really belong to his family for advice. And when it comes to planning, I mean, to add to what Andrew was saying, why is it that the president of the United States comes out and says, stay at home, the conditions are not safe right now to the people of Iran. We will tell you when it's safe to rise up. Admiral Brad Cooper came on Iran International, and we have, at least 30 million viewers worldwide, including people, tens of millions of people inside Iran who heard his message where he said, we are going to create the conditions to make it safe for you to rise up. Just wait. We heard the same thing from Israeli officials, but that never happened. So why go out and make such a grand statement like that only to walk back from it? And to Andrew's point, they were hitting Basij military checkpoints, but then they stopped. Well, why did you stop? And then you started striking bridges, for example, which caused a lot of backlash inside of Iran too. That part didn't make any sense to me. So obviously something happened where things didn't work out and they just went, okay, well, we'll just change the plan. And meanwhile, you've got an entire population that is hostage to this murderous regime, and now these world powers that are just playing with them like there's some sort of pawn in a nuclear deal.
Which in effect they are. Negar, I wanted to turn to you for a moment or two, what Andrew's just laid out and the consequences. And of course, we're all still learning about this so-called MOU that basically, if I can distill it to this, has the United States and the UAE and other countries, I'm sure, just sending boatloads of cash to Iran, the Strait of Hormuz reopening, the hostilities ceasing. Seems that the United States is trying to commit Israel to no longer responding to any attacks that hit its civilian population, Hezbollah,
That's not going to work
aka
out.
Iran. And the whole nuclear thing, that's kind of in abeyance. We'll get to it. I think that is more or less the kind of contours. Those are the contours of this agreement. I can tell you that in Israel, people are, I think they're just beyond stunned, shocked. It's like, I don't even know what to say or think. And before we began, Andrew and I were just noticing that as on October 7th, when Benjamin Netanyahu made himself very scarce, I don't believe he's spoken to the public yet today. And I mean, this is beyond calamitous. So that's kind of the snapshot of Israel. Negar, you have such close ties and contacts, both within the Iranian diaspora all over the world, but also you have close ties in Iran. Can you tell us what you know, what you're hearing and sensing so far about what we think is happening?
Yeah, so let me just read you a message that I received this morning. This is from somebody inside Iran. This woman is an activist. After 2 wars, and this is a translation, after 2 wars and the biggest street killing in modern history, mediated by the corrupt government of Pakistan, an agreement worse than the JCPOA was signed between a charlatan and a terrorist government. At least Obama didn't make a promise to the people. As we expected, people in this torn piece of paper are being ignored by the so-called most democratic country, most determined president, and a terrorist regime. We were neither interested in this real estate, nor do we care about this torn piece of paper, and we are impatiently waiting for the moment of the announcement, now she's saying, from Prince Reza Pahlavi's call and face again. So it seems like everyone's really abandoned the people of Iran, because we're also not hearing from the opposition at this point.
We're not hearing from anyone.
No.
And, you were talking just a few moments ago about these kind of, it was like kind of fits and starts, with mostly America, to a degree Israel saying, locked and loaded, your time has come, we're
Help is
soften,
coming.
help is on its way. And those kinds of, locked and loaded, help is on its way was mid-January, right after that massacre in Iran, where we think about 40,000 people or more may have been murdered over the course of a few days. But then nothing happened for over a month. And then it was like, okay, we're coming, we're going to fix things up for you. And then when the war finally began, like you and I spoke about this, Negar, many times, what exactly was America thinking these people are going to do? Andrew, you spoke about it in your paper and said, well, they did the kind of only rational thing was stay home and preserve their lives, right? Negar, like what are people saying, thinking, aside from what you've said already, which is very distressing? Like, did they have any idea what they were supposed to be doing to answer that call?
Exactly. The thing is that they never got that call. That's the point, right? Is they didn't know what to do. And we were told, and they were actually under the impression for January 8th and 9th, that there would be potentially even Israeli drones in the air. They thought when a call like that was made, for example, by the opposition, that there would be some sort of planning or coordination in place, and clearly there wasn't. And people right now are stuck between two worlds. This life that they can't go back to life before January 8th and 9th. You understand that. Nobody can go back to the life before October 7th. There's still so much trauma that they're dealing with. And they can't enter this life that they want to have, or that they thought they could at least potentially reach. So they're stuck in some sort of strange, I don't know, purgatory, whatever you want to call it. And they don't know what to do. So at this point, people are not thinking about a revolution. They're actually thinking of an exit plan, because there is no future left for them in Iran. These are the same, minus Khamenei Sr., who was killed, these are the exact same people who slaughtered more than 40,000, whatever, tens of thousands of people in literally the span of 2 days. And now you're going to go and shake their hand in Geneva, Switzerland? This is, I don't even have any words. People feel incredibly betrayed. People feel like they've been used. Now, I think Trump came out and said something along the lines of, to quote him, I never really cared for regime change.
Yeah, he's gone back and forth on that many times.
Many times. Yeah. So what are the people left to think? They don't trust anyone at this point. And the only kind of positive thing, if we can be positive right now, is that there's a lot of internal divisions within the regime and within the hardliners and the supporters of the regime. So could this deal potentially lead to some sort of collapse in the regime? It's too early to tell, but there's definitely some serious fighting happening right now. You see a lot of the regime supporters out in the streets calling for Aragchi, the foreign minister, and Ghalibaf, the speaker of the parliament, who's been apparently, I guess, talking to Vice President J.D. Vance, that they must resign. Some people have been calling for them to be killed. So this is pretty serious. And Vahidi from the IRGC and some hardliners like Navabian are again, calling for an end to any kind of deal. So that's a good sign, is the potential infighting, but also who's really running the show in Iran? Who's truly leading the country? I still don't have an answer for you. I don't even know if Moshe Khamenei, the Jr., is alive. So with all of that in mind, and the fact that we don't know who is running the show, that could definitely lead down the road, maybe a couple of months from now, to some sort of internal regime collapse.
I suspect the next really big decision point will come on Friday, when we actually learn what's in that deal. I think that could well be make or break, because unfortunately, if it does contain seriously billions of dollars going to the regime, then I think that might be something they could really sell as a win to people who are currently protesting. If it is very strict on what they do with their nuclear material and their nuclear program, if it's tying those billions of dollars to Iran actually doing something that can be credibly measured by the international community, then and it's not so good. But my confidence in that is low, as I can tell Viz is as well. But unfortunately, Trump is up against that really strict deadline. I think he's probably given away more than he wanted to because he needed to get Hormuz reopened. And it's really interesting that in his tweet about that, his Truth Social post, that was almost one of the first thing he was, that was what he focused on. It was Hormuz is open, let the oil flow. That was clearly uppermost in his mind. So we'll see what happens on Friday.
If it happens on Friday. I mean,
Yeah, if it happens.
Yeah, Friday.
No deal has been signed yet.
I wanted to get to that because initially they were going to do it by, I think, Zoom and docu-sign. I'm not making this up. And now apparently there's going to be some kind of, meeting in Geneva on Friday. But again, it's a long time. It's 4 days between now and then, and a lot can happen. Andrew, militarily, we've got a mess up in the north of Israel, as you know. There's not even any point anymore in tracking who's on first and second, who shot first. There's shooting. I read earlier online today, and I frankly think it may have been taken down by officials here, that someone was sitting in an airplane in northern Israel, I believe at the airport in Haifa, and the plane, a small airline, was taxiing and beginning to take off, and it suddenly came to a screeching halt, and the plane was full, and the captain said, Israeli airspace is closed in the north. We can't take off. So something was brewing earlier today. Again, we know that Prime Minister Netanyahu and his security colleagues have been in an undisclosed and new location since last night for discussions, meaning they clearly are concerned that in the way that they were able to hit Iranian officials in their secret bunkers and meeting spots, that they may be vulnerable to the same kind of hit. Bottom line is, there's a lot going on behind the scenes today. We've not heard from the Israeli government, and let's just assume that bit leaked about closed Israeli airspace in the north is true. I mean, there are so many ways militarily this can go off the rails. It will be a miracle if they meet, in my view, on Friday. What do you think, totally unfair question, is likely to transpire in the next few days?
I'm going to turn that question slightly because I'm not going to put my reputation in predicting the Middle East, because that would be a very silly thing to do. But what I will say is this: if I'm currently in the Israeli government, I'm sitting with my head in my hands, wondering what the hell to do, because you're on a fork. You've got two choices. You either accept Hezbollah presence in Lebanon and accept the knock-on effects for security of northern Israeli towns, villages, kibbutzim, or you have a strategic rupture with Washington who want you to ceasefire and you continue striking Hezbollah. That is a huge, huge decision point for Jerusalem. So it's an incredibly challenging decision point now for Jerusalem. And this is really, I think, a symptom of the fact that Bibi has subordinated Israeli strategy to Washington since Trump took power. It's been a trade-off. Bibi's had a lot of freedom of maneuver when it comes to things like Judea, Samaria, the West Bank, when it comes to Gaza, and indeed when it comes to striking in Lebanon. But unfortunately, when you subordinate yourself to Washington in that way, there comes a time where Washington can say no as well as yes. And we're at that point now. And it will be a huge strategic rupture if Bibi decides to go against Trump's wishes. And we've seen some of the language Trump has used about Bibi. This clearly isn't a partnership. Trump clearly sees Bibi as his subordinate, and he talks about him in that fairly dismissive, derogatory, incredibly rude way. And Bibi has some decisions to make this week, and what those decisions are going to be, I don't know, quite frankly, because of course he's got an election to worry about as well. It's not just Donald Trump, it's the Israeli general election, as it were. So yeah, I'm not going to put a prediction out there, but I can tell you that the choices that Bibi has right now are both bad, and that's not a good place to be in.
Yeah, I guess the one positive I'll sort of insert into that analysis, the fork, is that in spite of his authoritative voice and demeanor, Bibi Netanyahu is known for being notoriously indecisive. And I'm not going to predict what's going to happen, but I will go this far to suggest that he will contort himself into a pretzel over and over in the coming days. I don't think we're going to see anything really decisive up north other than doing his best to maintain the status quo, and obviously, hopefully won't strike Iran. You know, we were on high alert last night. We had home front command direction to expect swarms of missiles or drones or whatever from Iran, and Iran had warned that they were going to launch a big attack. And then I woke up this morning and I'm like, well, that was a good night's sleep, thank goodness. So they've clearly held their fire, and Trump said to them, hold your fire. And so Israel's held its fire, anything it was considering sending to Iran. And the real kind of, I guess, weak leg on the stool is Hezbollah. But Hezbollah, of course, Negar, for Iran, Hezbollah and Hamas, we'll leave the Houthis to the side for a moment, but Hezbollah and Hamas standing and kind of rearming and regrouping and reconstituting is a massive victory for Iran and for those terrorist organizations.
It's a huge victory, and you mentioned kind of people holding their fire, but this is just for now. Give it a few weeks, and this is not going to be the situation. Unfortunately, they're going to wait till they sign their deal, they release the funds, whatever it is, right? And in the meantime, Iran is going to rebuild, which is what they always do. And we talk a lot about this highly enriched uranium, but they have, what about the uranium that's at 20%? You don't need to be past the 3.67 threshold. What about the underground missile cities? I mean, in the city of Yas, for example, under, recreation centers and children playground, there are missiles that are the size of cities underground. Like, Iran is still a massive threat. They've got drones. You don't need a launching pad, which obviously is what Hezbollah's been doing, and it's been deadly in northern Israel. But at the same time, I have to point out that with the attacks that Iran has been conducting through Hezbollah, in many ways, yes, it's, ideological, and this is their biggest and most important proxy. But in some ways, they've come to save their proxy and to show that our proxy system or network is still there and still alive. Whereas the purpose of Hezbollah was always to protect not the Iranian people or Iran, but the Islamic regime inside of Iran. So we're kind of seeing a reversal there. But it's just amazing for me that after the, decapitation of Hezbollah command and control and taking out their leader, Hassan Nasrallah, and the fact that Syria is no longer under Bashar al-Assad, and so a lot of the arms coming from Iran can't go through Syria right now because apparently al-Shara is evidently cracking down on it, at least to a certain extent. It's just amazing for me to see them still standing, and it tells me that you can't kill a way of thinking.
Andrew, at the end, when you were sort of concluding your piece that you put out today, you pointed out all of the countries that emerge stronger with their international reputations enhanced, domestically, their governments being held in higher esteem and looking smart and powerful. And I gotta say, they're not the countries that I would like to see held up as the exemplars of the international order. Talk a bit about who those countries are and how upside down this outcome today seems to be.
Well, so the Qataris and the Pakistanis are the first two. They've established themselves as negotiators and had a real influence in Washington, which will really upset New Delhi. We can see Qatar just building on their usual negotiation ways. Pakistan and Qatar have given themselves real status as negotiators. We can see that Turkey has really leveraged its influence again in Washington, and as they did during the Gaza ceasefire, of course, they were very influential in getting the hostages released, and it shows that Erdogan has real sway with Trump. Again, he does like a strong man. The Chinese have actually come out of this really, really well, which is interesting because a lot of people think one of Washington's key motivations was the desire to kind of put China on the back foot through oil supply, but China's actually largely responsible for the global oil reserve maintaining for as long as it did. They've somehow managed to cut their import requirements by 25% since the war started, and nobody's quite sure how they did it or what they've done to achieve that. but it shows an enormous economic flexibility that I think potentially puts a hole in a lot of the American assumptions about how they exact leverage over China. And actually, the table on that has turned as well, because the amount of ammunition that's been expended during this war by the United States, it's far more difficult than just throwing money at the problem to put those missiles back in. You have to have a number of rare earth minerals, and China controls 90% of the world's supply. So China's got some real leverage now. So when they went in trying to get leverage over China, there's every chance they've given China leverage over the United States. On top of that, the regime fired, the number of missiles they fired was about equivalent to what war games have suggested China might fire if they were trying to seize Taiwan. And those missiles were effective. We can safely say that Iran is a real missile power, because even though they were degraded, launches were degraded, they were still able to score hits all over the place, force the Americans to move their tankers, force them to move their bases, empty out radar sites. You know, they scored some really big hits, unfortunately. And so China will be looking at that ammunition expenditure on the American side. They'll look at their own rare earth mineral monopoly. They'll look at what they need to take Taiwan, and they'll be feeling pretty good right now, I suspect. So a number of countries, I think, have done particularly well. The Gulf states, I think, will now heavily pivot away from Washington. I suspect they will try for a rapprochement with Iran. They prefer stability, knowing what their threat looks like, than they will, taking a roll of the dice or, for example, normalizing with Israel.
Boy, you got a lot going on there.
It's all going on today, right?
I'm gonna wrap now. I just wanted to make this quick comment with respect to the China reducing its oil imports by about 25%. My understanding is they had accumulated huge reserves. Why they would choose not to import as much, though, and relieve the pressure on prices for other countries, I'm not going to go there and speculate. Negar, Andrew's thoughts are, should this kind of weird moment in which we find ourselves continue, we will likely see the Gulf states looking towards some form of rapprochement, improved relations with Iran. Your final thoughts on this head-spinning moment? And I'd like you to work in, if you wouldn't mind, you mentioned earlier that many Iranians are kind of looking for the exit door and a plan B. I can tell you that phenomenon is also very prevalent in Israel. People have just had enough. What's your immediate sort of sign-off comment?
I mean, to add to what Andrew was saying, I mean, look at how strong the Qataris have come out of all of this. You had President Trump thank them. I mean, this is the same country that not only, supports and the Muslim Brotherhood, and Hamas, they were also housing, and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind of 9/11, was living and working in Qatar in the 90s for a number of years. So I mean, this is a country that likes to play all sides, and in the end is a detriment to the United States. And to see the president thank them is very, very, very concerning. Yes, the Arab Persian Gulf countries are terrified, and I'm surprised by the lack of attention in the world for their suffering. In Kuwait, for example, an 11-year-old girl was killed while sleeping from an Iranian missile. Well, where are the campus protests for people like that? I mean, you saw the footage of the Iranian attack on the airport. What does an airport have to do with U.S. bases in Kuwait?
Civilian
How cowardly. Yeah, and there's, in addition to somebody being killed there are now at least 60 people in hospital fighting for their lives. Nobody seems to care about them. They've had their limbs, some people had to have their limbs cut off as a result of that attack. So of course they're going to be scared. I mean, Iran could wipe them out essentially. So they're going to try and do something to, like Andrew said, to provide stability. And to the people of Iran, well, where the hell are they going to go? I mean, right now in the United States, we have a case where an Iranian asylum seeker was just sent to Central Africa because she had the option to go back to Iran, or there was some African country that we can send you to. And then she was like, well, I can't go back to Iran because they're going to kill me. So there's no good options right now for the people of Iran in terms of what they do. But I do know that the Iranian regime can't kill their way out of this. And things are not going to stay like this for even the near future, I don't think. The people of Iran are not going to forget. They've been through a lot. There was the January massacre. There was the internet blackout. There was this, Hormuz blockade. And then there was a war. I mean, since January, it's only been a few months. And look at what they've been through. So I think once they have time to kind of recalibrate, we're going to see potentially another stage in this conflict between the people of Iran and the regime. So you have to give them some time. But this is not going to be the status quo forever, whether Israel or the United States is there or isn't there. The people of Iran can't live like this anymore. Someone or something is got to give way at some point.
Andrew, last word?
Yeah, and that's the hope. And you know what? If I'm in a position of power in Israel, what I think I'm doing at this point is really surging resources to people who will be in a position to make a difference. And you know, there's every chance, I think, with the regime relatively weakened, and I say relatively, that we could see a proper insurgency campaign if it's backed and funded by an outside power. So you know, things going bang at government buildings, you know, that kind of attrition, I think would be really helpful. But as Najal says, the fact is this is an intolerable position. We've seen the greatest sort of protest in the regime's history in the last few years. There's clearly a groundswell against them. How long can they hang on for? And I think a lot of it's going to depend on how much money they get from Donald Trump. If this deal gets signed, the more money they get, the better Iran's economy will be, and the less number of people will be inclined to push back. So it's a lose-lose for the Iranian people right now. But you know, that's my long-term hope is that there will be a way of supporting them, throwing resources at them, and giving them the chance to take their destinies into their own hands without being slaughtered, and actually having a chance of success. So that's the ray of the ray of hope that I would throw as a final note.
Well, I think we would all agree on that. And I really am appreciative to both of you, busy people, on this really important day for carving out the time to speak. It was just a real pleasure to have you together, and we're going to do this again. So on tenterhooks until Friday, thank you, Andrew Fox, Negar Mojtahedi, so much.
Thank you.
It's now midday Tuesday in Israel. Since recording this interview on Monday night, Israel time, a few interesting little twists in the plot have arisen. Among them, Iran is apparently charging a toll on ships coming and going in the Strait of Hormuz. But they've gone green, apparently, and they're calling it an environmental tax. You gotta love the humor. The Islamic Republic of Iran understands Western naivete so well, and man, are they rubbing our faces in it. Meanwhile, Iranian Foreign Minister Aragchi stated earlier today that any Israeli presence or attack in Lebanese territory will be seen by Tehran as a violation of the Memorandum of Understanding that no one but Iran and America have read. Trump, on the other hand, has been a little wobbly on that rather critical point, saying Israel can protect its people, but then he gets kind of fuzzy on specifics. And that is the fork to which Andrew Fox referred in the podcast, and which you can read about in his paper. Israel either acts to protect its sovereignty and civilians from constant Hezbollah attacks. And remember, of course, that Hezbollah is the jewel in Iran's crown of proxies. Or Prime Minister Netanyahu folds and allows the pummeling of civilians in northern Israel to continue. That is one hell of a fork on which to be foisted. And that, dear listeners, is a wrap. Thanks as always for being here. For those of you who have not already done so, please consider supporting our work with a premium subscription at stateoftelaviv.com, or make a financial contribution to help us out at Buy Me a Coffee. We are independent, feisty, and rely on our readers and listeners to support our work. Each person who steps up makes a huge difference. Even in the state of Tel Aviv, we have to keep the lights on. Until next time, stay safe, and thanks for being here. We love hearing from you, so please comment on our website, stateoftelaviv.com, or send us a note to vivian@stateoftelaviv.com. That's VIVIAN @stateoftelaviv.com. And if you go to our website, stateoftelaviv.com, you can find the subscribe button and take it from there. Hope that you do that. On behalf of the State of Tel Aviv core team, Jan Zabo, our creative, graphic, visual, and marketing man, Amir White, producer and editor extraordinaire, sound guy, who is also impressively patient with me and my boomer tech deficiencies, and our social media manager who pitches in on everything. Thank you, Maya Naftalin. Thanks to the team, and thank you, listeners, for being here. Until next time, stay safe.